from the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
(7/7/21). Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's show. James Azar here. It's July 7th, 7/7/21. And if we were living in 1977, today would be 7/7/77. And if you were at a casino today, you would go and bet all your money on sevens, right? But that's not the case. Cybersecurity news is here, folks. Happy Wednesday and good morning to Matt. Matt Lee. Good morning to Matt Copeland joining us on YouTube. The awesome James McQuiggan. Good morning. He'll be joining me tomorrow right here on the Practitioner Brief, so you don't want to miss it. The awesome James McQuiggan. John, the legendary John. Good morning, all. Happy Wednesday. Good morning to Alla, and good morning to Nathan, who is up early on the West Coast, brother. You are a machine. All right, we've got a busy show today. Not talking about Cassia. Sorry, not going to do it. There's no new information that I've seen. None. Everything's just recycled, rehashed. A supermarket in Sweden that's been shut down for 3 days because of it. But that's about it. We're going to talk about other stuff because there's a ton more going on in security that we need to pay attention to. One is the Microsoft pushing an out-of-band update. The White House taking a tough stance with Russia, kind of. Western Digital with another massive 0 day. The Pentagon is canceling the JEDI contract, and the Android apps in Google Play are harvesting Facebook credentials. But for what purpose, we shall soon find out. But before we get started on today's show, a big shout out to the companies who make it all possible. KnowBe4, Wistic, and Ativo Networks. Go and check them out. You can see more about them in the show notes. So go and show some love and support to those awesome companies who support our show. And without further ado, folks, how about a cup of coffee? I need it. I've been, James McQuiggan had me on his podcast on his clubhouse room this morning at 7 a.m., which means I had to wake up super early, even earlier than I'm used to. Good morning to Bob. Good morning to David. Bob, also, thank you for having me on your show this morning. I really appreciate it. Cheers, everyone. We do know that James McQuiggan likes to eat popcorn and cold pizza every morning. And by the way, Italy beat Spain yesterday in the Euro. Today, game 2. Then the Euro finals over the weekend. It's going to be awesome. All right, here we go, folks. Good morning to Roger as well. And let's get right into this out-of-band patch by Microsoft. So Patch Tuesday's next week, but Microsoft couldn't wait until next week to release this ban. Just tells you how important this is. They've released the KB50049 emergency security update to fix the actively exploited PrintNightmare 0-day vulnerabilities in the Windows Print Spooler service impacting all Windows version. However, the patch is incomplete and the vulnerability can still be locally exploited to gain system privileges. They've patched the remote code execution bug, which is tracked to CVE 2021-34527, allows attackers to take over affected servers via remote code execution with system privileges, as it will enable them to install programs, view, change, or delete data, and create new accounts with full user rights. You can see all the instructions here. All the stories are linked in the show notes below, so you can go and catch them there as well. But you want to get this patched. You want to get this updated as soon as possible. This 0 days actively being exploited. I was speaking to someone yesterday who's in threat intel, someone who I value very, very dearly within our community. And he said, James, people are threat actors are actively exploiting this. They're actively targeting organizations. Let's get this patched. Microsoft rarely does an out-of-band patch, especially when next week is Patch Tuesday. So they could have waited a week and released this if it wasn't being actively exploited. It is being actively exploited. Please make sure to get your systems patched. Make this your priority. Now the patch only fixes the remote exploitation part. There's still the physical aspect, but we're unlikely to see James Bond, Jason Bourne, or Jack Ryan or anyone else trying to do this. So, I think the local part is highly unlikely and carries greater risk for threat actors than the remote part. I'll say good morning to David Brin, who's joining us, and he goes, I bought a Keurig to keep up with your morning coffee routine. That's good, David. Welcome to the world of coffee, and coffee is good. Good morning. This is Pedro. Thank you for joining us this morning, Pedro. Really appreciate it. We'll move to our next story here. Get your stuff updated with Windows. Come on, folks. All right. The other story is U.S. is warning Russia to take action against the same threat actors that are responsible for the Cassia ransomware attack. We saw that in the last conversation, just simply several weeks ago. President Biden had asked President Putin to get a grip on ransomware gangs operating in Russia's jurisdiction. And just several weeks later, Cassia, whose VSA was whose remote management and monitoring software was compromised, was affected by it. And now White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, on Tuesday offered an update to the U.S. response and saying that the president's made clear so-and-so. But remember last week we talked a little bit about NATO and how NATO said that a cyber attack on any NATO nation could be considered an act of war and could lead to military response. And I said, all you're doing is you're teasing these dictators and they're not going to do a damn thing about it. I hate it when I'm proven right when I say this stuff. Like, I always pray that what I say is proven wrong, but here it is. The worst the U.S. could do is sanction Russia even more. But further sanctioning Russia isn't going to work, and I'll tell you why. There's an intertwine here between what's happening from a cyber security perspective on a geopolitical level that many people aren't aware of. One, the current White House is trying to negotiate a new deal, a new essentially GSPOA with Iran. And that deal itself is going to be very problematic and challenging because it's the EU, Russia, China, the US. And so you need Russia on your side in those negotiations. So if they now turn around and start sanctioning Russia, Russia is going to have very interest in supporting Iran entering a new nuclear deal. Now, whether I agree with that deal or not has nothing to do with this specific situation, but all of this is intertwined. Putin knows this. The White House knows this. NATO knows this. And yet here we are with this one, folks. So this is going to be very interesting to see what the reaction from the White House will be. We'll see what CISA and everyone says about it, and we'll see what will happen with this specific threat actor in Russian jurisdiction. We'll move to our next story where Western Digital users face another RCE. So if you're Western Digital customers, you've known for a while that your devices are vulnerable. Brian Krebs reported on the fact that threat actors are able to remotely log in and completely erase your cloud storage devices. Well, now there's another 0-day, and it entails an attack chain that allows an unauthenticated intruder to execute code as root, install permanent backdoors on the vendor's network attached storage devices, their NASs, and it's found in all Western Digital NAS devices running the old, no longer supported MyCloud 3 operating system, an OS that researchers said is in limbo, given that Western Digital recently stopped supporting this OS. So if you're following Brian Krebs, you've realized he's been on top of this. He's done an unbelievable job of highlighting just really what's going on with Western Digital. So multiple 0 days, very difficult. All right, so I'm not going to go down that route. But what I am going to go down the path of is it seems like Western Digital isn't really sure how to deal with this. So they're saying that all of these 0 days get eliminated with OS 5. But OS 5 was a complete rewrite of OS 3. And it skewed just some of the popular features and functionality, so not all users were likely to upgrade, which is why so many users stayed on OS 3. And according to the latest 0 day, and this comes from Brian Krebs as well. This one is a much broader range of newer Western Digital MyCloud NOS boxes. And Dominsky and Ribeiro originally planned to present this at the Pentagon hacking contest in Tokyo. They never did. Obviously, we all know why. But in February, they did publish the attack chain they pieced together and shown in a YouTube video right here below. And you can see it. On the website. The link is the third link in the show notes, so you guys can catch it there as well. In March 2021, the company said that the OS3 would no longer be supported, and we strongly encourage moving to the cloud as soon as humanly possible, according to Western Digital. But this isn't exactly cutting it for a lot of people who look at this and say this is a lack of responsibility from Western Digital's end, and that they're not taking this as serious. You'll see a lot of companies kind of switch off of that here in a little bit. So that's that on the Western Digital 0-day, which continue to be very, very difficult to deal with. I want to get to some comments here. Eric says, I tell you, flicking the lights on and off at a Russian-controlled electrical substation, that might get some attention, also be a form of kinetic engagement, even though that's a possibility. Yeah, only if you do that, what are the chances that they would actually respond to that by backing off and stopping these ransomware gangs? Typically with dictators, force has to be met with force. So you've either got to publicly deface Putin in a way where there's no other way for the people to know that it's happening and that you're doing it. Essentially similar to how every week there's a mysterious fire at some nuclear facility in Iran. And Iran goes, we don't know who's doing it, but everyone knows who's doing it, right? It's the Mossad. We know the Mossad's in there and it's in infiltrating them. But it's essentially, you fight power with power. We're not trying to get attention here. We're trying to deliver a message. I think that's the response that needs to be done here. We'll move to another story that's very, very interesting. And it kind of goes into the mindset of DoD. So a few years ago, JEDI contract worth about $10 billion. Microsoft won it. Amazon sued. And it's been kind of in limbo of different court hearings. And now the contract has been canceled. And the contract's been canceled because it's been mirrored in legal challenges. And it seems like there's a change within the Pentagon on just not sticking to one cloud provider. And I think part of it has to do with the fact that Microsoft doesn't have the ability to scale like Amazon does. So we're likely to see something there that's going to take place. The contract has now been canceled. I'll be interested to see what the new agenda will be. I've personally thought that going with one cloud provider is a great, great risk because you're essentially letting everyone know where all your crown jewels exist. Hopefully they now go around and they say it's a $10 billion contract. We're going to give $3.3 billion to Microsoft, $3.3 billion to Google Cloud, and we're going to give $3.3 billion to AWS. Or they may give each $3 billion and then give $1 billion to smaller FedRAMP approved data centers to also be part of it. It'd be interesting to see that. I think that's the right approach from a risk from a risk perspective as well. Let's get to some comments before we do our last story of the day. Nathan says, look at what Russia's doing on the ground in Ukraine. Indeed, Russia is but they're doing it in the Ukraine, and the Ukraine has strategic and historical importance for Russia. There's more there than just that, but Eric Williams says, you nailed it. That's precisely the risk benefit of that type of engagement. I think we ought to, this has to go beyond just a sanctioned response. It's just my opinion though, but luckily it doesn't count for anything, but to all of you awesome people watching this morning. Finally, we'll go into Android apps, and Google Play are harvesting Facebook credentials. Why is this important? So most people's Facebook credentials and most people's social media credentials carry the same username and password. I get one, I can get the other. These apps are all here, 9 different apps, all harvesting essentially your people's Facebook credentials, with some of them having over 5 million downloads to, the app lock manager, maybe 10 installs, and it's likely the developer himself and not anyone serious. So it's something very important. So it looks like a legitimate Facebook login and web view within the app. You enter your information, it then harvests it, and it can then go around and do malicious activities. Predominantly, I'm looking at this as a way to gain access to other accounts as well, and use Facebook as a way to phish other people in an attempt to get higher and higher up the food chain. We'll get to some comments before we end the show today. Tin hats aside, but I find it hard to believe we aren't engaging in these types of clandestine activities throughout other places, but we aren't doing anything to Russia that they aren't being reported upon in an attempt for them to save face. Yeah, I mean, David, you bring up a great point. We do a lot of clandestine operations. We could be doing a ton of cyber attacks in Russia. Russian media is not free to report things. There's no requirement to publicly notify people in Russia of a breach. And so we could be having a field day with Russia and not know it here because it's not being advertised, and the local media here isn't covering it either. According to Nathan, he says, but Putin is definitely losing it. He just outlawed the use of the word champagne for all French champagne. Yeah, tyrants tend to do tyrannical moves on the downfall, and Putin's been in office longer than I've been in a grown adult legally, so that tells you something. I'll just say that the SVR is certainly aware of U.S. Cybercom has tentacles in their stuff. I'm sure they are, and we know that Cybercom does do that. We saw that previously with when President Trump in 2018 ordered Cyber Command to launch preemptive cyber attacks on Russia and Iran during the midterm elections. We know that we're able to do that. The question is, what's the deterrent here from this specific ransomware attack? And if the only thing you're telling is you're calling up the other guy and saying, hey, you've got a bunch of criminals in your neighborhood that are doing a bunch of problems in my neighborhood, you better take care of it. Well, and Putin's going to be like, or what? You're going to sanction us? We're already sanctioned. You're going to cripple our economy is already crippled. You're going to launch war? War is the best thing that can happen. It creates patriotism. People go behind these leaders because they come and say, look, they're attacking us. They're attacking the motherland. They're attacking Russia. They're attacking our way of life. They're imperialists, blah, blah. And it goes against all conventional beliefs. That's part of the challenge of dealing with people like President Xi in China, or President Putin in Russia, or Kim Jong-un in North Korea, or, the hanger of Tehran, the new president of Iran, who we're bound to see more and more of as he settles into his role as a very hardline president for that country. And we're bound to see that translate into malicious cyber activities. We're already seeing that translate in the field. So, we'll see what happens there. Lonnie says, close another diplomatic consulate. And they'll reply by closing another U.S. diplomatic consulate. There's strategies there that are beyond our pay level, Lonnie. But yeah, we could do something else there. We'll get to the final 2 comments here. One from Eric. Eric says, ransomware is going to ransom. You can't stop the clicking and the downloading. You nailed it, brother. And Nathan says, we have to have a better approach to cybersecurity as a domestic policy. Nailed it. Yes, we do. We've got to do better. But we also have to understand that cyber is not perfect, that we're always going to be in these cat and mouse games, and that we've got to mitigate the impact. And I think with Kessia, all the headlines over a slow weekend have been mitigated because we're not seeing as big of an impact here locally as we've seen in Europe and in other places around the world. Not saying it's okay that it happens in Europe and not here, but nonetheless, Europe has its own challenges as we speak. Folks, tonight, 8 p.m., Tech Town Square with myself and Eddie. You don't want to miss it. Be there. We'll be live right here on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. If you have not subscribed to the CyberHub podcast, please make sure to do so right now. Tomorrow, right here on the show, James McQuiggan of Know Before will be joining me as we wrap up this awesome short week. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you for watching today's show. You can find all the show, the links to all the stories in the show notes. Also, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform. Give us a 5-star rating that helps boost us up in the ranking. And make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at CyberHub Podcast. Have an awesome rest of the day. And as Matt Lee says, have a safe and secure day, y'all. And I'll say, stay cyber safe. Until tomorrow, folks. And this evening, Tech Town Square, 8 p.m. Don't miss it. See you there. Cheers.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.